Hello everyone, big news coming from Ireland. Paschal Donohoe, Ireland's Minister for Finance, has announced he is to resign immediately, and he will resign his seat as a TD for Dublin Central later this week because he's taken up a job as Chief Knowledge Officer with the World Bank. Now, this is a bombshell for the Irish government because Donohoe has been a linchpin of the Fine Gael agenda over the past decade and a half. He was originally appointed by Enda Kenny, and of course Enda Kenny said Ireland was a great little country to do business in, which was code for opening the door to the austerity and the vulture funds in terms of the bank bailout and enforcing the bank bailout on the people of Ireland that led to devastating austerity and a massive cut on basic public and social services that cost so many lives. But Paschal Donohoe was the able linchpin to implement this agenda, and then he got awarded with a position in Europe as the president of the Eurogroup. He's been there for the last 5 years. He just recently started a new term with the Eurogroup in the last 4 months. So it is a little bit of a surprise to some that he's moving on to the World Bank. But of course the World Bank is part of the same neoliberal agenda that will pursue the same end goals like the World Economic Forum. It's always been pushing US hegemony for decades. So Donohoe will fit in well with the World Bank in his cushy job in Washington DC, probably biding time before he goes for a job as the head of the International Monetary Fund. But as I said, he is a key arch globalist and has been pushing this neoliberal agenda for years. He's very much a purveyor of the school of Peter Sutherland and his branch of economics in terms of the globalization agenda. Now, as I said, he's been the chair of the Eurogroup, the ECOFIN, and he's been very much behind the whole agenda around tax haven Ireland, opening the door to vulture funds and funneling more money upwards in society towards the corporations away from the interests of the ordinary people. Now today he was at a conference called State Street Ireland Market Insights this morning before he went on and tendered his resignation to Simon Harris, and he said when he was resigning that he was privileged to take part in this process over the past few years. And of course State Street is one of these massive institutional bankers, much the same as Vanguard and BlackRock, that really have their tentacles in more or less most corporations around the world and have massive control and pull in the levers of the political processes also in many of these countries. And we've seen that with the centralisation of control and the drive towards the technocratic European Union, and then we've seen the drive towards the World Economic Forum and their agenda. Now he said he was also honoured to take his position as the head of the Eurogroup as well. So Donohoe's gone off into the sunset on his big pension, and that probably got the knock on the door maybe from one of his masters to move upwards because his job is done in Ireland. It's time to move on to the next stage of his project. And over the last couple of months he has been working feverishly on trying to push forward the digital euro programme in the European Union. And of course that's well on its train to be enacted, along with the digital identification through the European Union Asylum and Migration Pact that Donohoe has been very much a supporter of. So he's a yes man for the European Union, yes man for the globalists, and a no man for the working class people of Ireland. Now this will have a major political fallout in Ireland. We'll see two by-elections due to take part in early next year, one in his constituency, Dublin Central, which I'm sure will be very interesting. And let's see how that develops. Perhaps Jerry Hutch might be running again as an independent, and we'll wait and see how that develops over the next months. And not to mention the Galway by-election that's due to take place following the election of Catherine Connolly as President of Ireland. So Fine Gael have moved quickly. I understand that Harris will be moving into the position of finance. We can laugh later. Harris moving into finance. And not to mention McEntee might be moving into the position as Minister for Foreign Affairs. So we have our own clueless clown in foreign affairs here now. McEntee go well with Kaya Kallas in the European Union as their main foreign affairs advocate of the European Union, Kaya Kallas, alongside Helen McEntee. But to go back to Donohoe for a minute, obviously Donohoe saw through the whole COVID pandemic in terms of the greatest transfer of wealth towards the billionaires in society, has overseen the upholding of the financial system in Ireland that benefits the super rich at the expense of ordinary people. And his agenda in the World Bank will be more of the same. It'll be pushing along the same neoliberal agenda, driving towards the market liberalisation approach that the World Bank has pursued for years at the behest of US hegemony. Now, of course, they drive through public policy and their political regime changes in those countries, and it's under the remit of challenging and ending extreme poverty. Now, isn't that interesting? Like, ending extreme poverty at the same time, maybe it's one of the stakeholder capitalism sustainable development goals, rather than challenging and a redistribution of wealth, but more money is getting funneled upwards. As I said, the inequalities have deepened in Irish society. It's coming into the winter period as well, when more and more people are struggling to keep their heating on in this exceptionally cold period of time. And of course, up to 3,000 people die every year because of fuel poverty in Ireland. This is a country where the top 10%, richest 10%, have 50% of the wealth, and 1 in 5 children are in poverty. And not to mention the 16,000 people in homeless accommodation. So perhaps this is the real legacy of Paschal Donohoe, not the one of fiscal prudency and a safe pair of hands, really that's going to be pushed on by the media and many of the political classes eulogising about Donohoe over the next period of time. He's moving upwards to a job in the World Bank to pursue the same agenda at the behest of the hegemony of the United States, and moving to Washington DC to carry out that, to inflict more hardship and austerity on more countries around the world. Currently they have about 189 members of the World Bank. Of course, that was set up in 1944 following the Bretton Woods Agreement alongside with the IMF. So maybe Donohoe has done his time here, and he's got the knock on the door to move upwards into this position as well in the World Bank. So let me know in the comments what you think of what's going on. It'll have major ramifications for Ireland in terms of political system, and let's see how this develops over the next period of time. So thanks so much for all the support, and thanks very much to Barry, who most recently supported me through buying me a coffee. If you'd like to support me on that, please do so, and thanks for sharing my videos and comments on the content I've discussed today in relation to Donohoe's resignation as the Finance Minister of Ireland. Thanks so much for the support. Slán go fóill.